Hi there, and welcome to this video about line of reasoning and methods development within writing for the AP Language and Composition course. The previous video that is on this playlist talks about the reading skills that will be supplemental to your writing skills. If you haven't looked at that or gone through those notes yet, I advise to start there real quick before you get into the writing skills. We're going to be focusing on two skills today, 6A and 6C. And the first one of these for line of reasoning is skill 6.A. And this says we want to develop a line of reasoning and commentary that explains it throughout an argument. And we'll talk about what this it is in a moment. But we look at our key task words here and what's important. Develop, that means to create and structure. And what we're being asked to develop is a line of reasoning, a logical progression to prove a claim. And along with that line of reasoning, commentary, a discussion of that claim that explains the line of reasoning throughout the argument. The it there is referring to the line of reasoning, but I think you also keep in mind that's going to refer to the claim because we're trying to keep our claim organized and structured. Now, the explain there, what we're looking for specifically is that you can connect evidence and the claim clearly, that you're not leaving things assumed, that you're putting evidence and commentary and connections all together, and you are articulating that in your own words. The other thing that's implied here is that your evidence should come throughout an argument, and the commentary should be throughout the argument, and the line of reasoning should be pervasive throughout. It's not just in one spot. It's not just an organized paragraph or an organized introduction. It is a consistently organized and flowing piece of writing that develops this idea logically. There are 4 supplemental standards with 6A. 1D, 1E, 1F, and 1M. We'll go over the 4 of these in more detail in a moment. 1D, though, says commentary explains the significance and relevance of evidence in relation to the line of reasoning. In short, your evidence is connected and specific to what we're looking at in regards to your claim and your line of reasoning. That you're not just putting evidence in kind of by happenstance, but it is intentional and it is purposeful. 1.E reads that the sequence of paragraphs in a text reveals the argument's line of reasoning. For this one, your paragraphs and when you introduce information is important because the paragraphs should build off one another, that they should develop in conjunction with one another to help prove an overarching claim and to help maintain a consistent line of reasoning. And 1.F says flaws in the line of reasoning may render an argument specious or illogical. In essence here, that if you don't have a clear line of reasoning, that if you have not laid out your argument, that there might be problems where it becomes only plausible or partially true or doesn't make any sense at all. The last one we have here, 1.M, your body paragraphs of a written argument, they make claims. They are supported with evidence, and they have provided commentary that explains how the paragraph contributes to the reasoning of the argument. Much like in the reading section, we're going to look over a basic formula that helps achieve this. But let's go back to 1D. 1D, what does this look like? What are some tips to be able to provide commentary that explains the significance and relevance of evidence in relation to the line of reasoning? So 2 writing tips. First, does the sentence explain how the important information from the evidence supports the claim? The sentence being a sentence that follows evidence, that follows commentary. There is some point there where you've intentionally set aside writing time to bridge the gap between evidence, explanation, and overall claim, that you are making that connection clear for your reader. A kind of reminder is to not leave anything assumed, that there's nothing that you can just expect the reader to go, oh, well, yeah, obviously. You need to make that connection, especially when it comes to analysis. The second point there, is that connection clear? Is it logical? And this is a big one, is it supported by other elements or evidence in the writing? For what you're trying to argue there, if you're trying to prove significance and relevance, where does it continue to be relevant? Now, for your first piece of evidence in a writing section, this might be just saying, here's my first piece, and then you build and reference back to it. Or you make a clear connection early on with the strongest piece of evidence that you have, and you make that connection incredibly clear, explicit. Nothing is left to be implicit here. So right off the bat, we want to make sure that our evidence is being tied to and left in conjunction with our line of reasoning. 1.E then says, the high with the one high E there is my voice. 1.E says the sequence of paragraphs and text reveals the argument's line of reasoning. So this is the best tip that can come out of this, and in general for this section, is that if you want a good line of reasoning, you need to outline before you write. It might seem like a waste of time. It might seem like unnecessary additions there. But if you can outline before you write, the order of introduction can influence how persuasive your evidence can be. In essence, you have 5 pieces of evidence, but you know you've only got 30 minutes to write. Pick the 3 or 2 best ones and prioritize them up front. That way, if you run short on time or you realize you can combine things as you're going into it, you have your strong pieces out front. This also, again, so you see that helps with time management. It gives you the best evidence first and allows you to tie more things together as you develop it. Additionally, if you have an abundance of time, then you can bring in more information of a secondary nature and be able to enhance that strong initial evidence that you have. So outline, 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 outline. The best pieces of advice that I can give you here as you're going into this. Now, 1.F, this talks about flaws in the line of reasoning may render an argument specious or illogical. Flaws can be an incomplete explanation. A flaw can be a poorly structured idea. Flaws can also just be pure nonsense. This is, again, where outlining comes in place. If you have not logically laid out when you want to introduce information, you just know what's there, and you start kind of pushing it and shoving it into your writing, well, then there might not be a clear line of reasoning. This flaw could just be an incomplete explanation. You might see all the rhetorical devices. You might have annotated it perfectly. You might have a complete comprehension. But if you don't articulate that, then we're dealing with some problems. Finally, REO 1.M, this is the exact same slide as the last portion, except we've changed it from a reading strategy or reading look for to a writing tip. If you're looking for a basic body paragraph formula, follow the one here. Open up with your claim, build into your evidence, discuss within commentary, and then connect it to the overall claim and argument / your line of reasoning. It's the exact same process that we want to follow as we're reading. So these skills right here are meant to structure and create a line of reasoning in your writing that takes us from a claim or from a series of observations that are built upon a claim to fruition. Now, I would really strongly recommend looking at REO 1.A and 1.B in regards to how to develop and look at creating a claim. Do you create a claim first and then come back to the evidence that supports it, or do you talk about the process that leads into your claim? Both have very different looks and very different outcomes, but again, they all do support what we have here for turning into body paragraphs. Now, looking at methods of development, we're going to look at 6C here for writing. And this one for methods of development is incredibly short but incredibly loaded. It says, use appropriate methods of development to advance an argument. It's almost as if the College Board wants to keep this as open-ended as possible and not pigeonhole you in your writing. And that is actually what I think is happening here. The word use means to incorporate, and I have the detail, a rhetorical device to develop a claim. That's what the usage is here. So you're going to use appropriate, which means you want to consider purpose and function, methods of development to advance an argument. Advance means to prove your argument. Now, methods of development are not just going to be basic modes. It's going to be the oration model, Rogerian argument, Tolman. It can be the Aristotelian appeals, rhetorical framework. It is a method of development that lets you say, here is my claim and here's how I intend to prove it. So this can be cause and effect, where you've littered in some elements of the Aristotelian appeals. You can be talking about the warrant and the backing from Tolman as you're walking us through a process. Now, for this one, we have very similar, if not the same, subpoints that we did in reading. For REO 1.I, when developing ideas through narration, one of the more common modes, writers are going to offer details about real-life experiences and offer reflections and insights on the significance of those experiences. So if you're going to use narration, your real-life experiences and reflections can talk about the significance of those experiences. It adds weight and value here. If we're thinking modes of discourse, this could be testimony, possibly even authority if it's something that you could be an expert on or you're citing an expert on. For 1.J, when developing ideas through cause and effect, writers present a cause, assert the effects or consequences of that cause, or present the series of causes and the subsequent effect. So the first part there is saying, here's the cause and this will be the effect. You're going to say, here's the outcome, or say, look, we're on our way to this outcome. The second one says you give causes and then the subsequent effects. You show what actually happened. So the first method there asserts what's going to happen. You're telling us. The second one is, look, this cause led directly to this effect. You're showing us. For REO 1.K, when developing ideas through comparison and contrast, writers present a category of comparison and then examine the similarities and or differences between the objects of comparison. We all know this method. This is very common, but the last part of this is where we got to pay a little extra attention. When analyzing similarities or differences, like categories of comparison must be used. So what this is saying here is kind of the old adage of apples and oranges. You don't want to compare apples and oranges together. You want to be able to say, look, we are comparing these on equal ground. The example I gave in the previous video about comparing professional athletes is still appropriate here. It is impossible to fairly compare, let's say, a Michael Jordan or a LeBron James to a Michael Phelps to a Apollo Ono. If you look at basketball and swimming and speed skating, there are a ton of different criteria on which you can say makes them the best athlete, but they're not fair. Swimming is a team and an individual event. Basketball is a team sport. Speed skating, again, is an entirely different venue where you're going objectively against time, but just like swimming is, but basketball's points. So we want to make sure that your similarities are similar, are reasonable, and not too much of a stretch when doing a compare and contrast. Finally, 1.L, when developing ideas through definition or description, writers relate the characteristics, features, or sensory details of an object or an idea, sometimes using examples or illustrations. So when we look at definition and description, we're going to pair these two together. We're talking about the details, the aspects. You're trying to put it together so you can show us something. When dealing with methods of development, please, please, please do not limit yourself to only modes or modes of discourse. You can develop it in a way that helps prove the line of reasoning. Abstract and complicated rhetorical devices can be used effectively, but they're not necessary. They are good supplements, they're good additions to. As long as you have a clear method of proving your line of reasoning, that's what methods of development is doing. Line of reasoning, overarching plan for what you're trying to do, methods of development, how you're going about showing that line of reasoning. I hope you found this video instructional and useful for your understanding of AP language and composition. If you have any additional questions, please contact Mr. Neary directly. Otherwise, thank you for watching this video.